Barack Obama sat under the bright lights, quietly holding a sheet of paper. Moments later, Donald Trump's voice was booming through a phone call on live television. The contrast was striking, and the whole country felt it. As the cameras rolled, Obama leaned back in his chair, calm and unreadable. The event wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It was billed as a town hall on the economy, focused on families struggling to get by after months of political gridlock. Yet, in Phoenix, Arizona, there was a sense that something bigger was unfolding. The networks had built anticipation for days. This wasn't a book tour or a friendly chat. A former president was stepping back into prime time, ready to address the nation directly. Millions tuned in, waiting to hear his words. Under the studio lights, with the audience shifting in their seats, Obama adjusted his tie and gave the host a polite smile. Mark Hanley, a tough journalist with a reputation for blunt questions, went straight to the point. Mr. President, many Americans are struggling. The White House calls this relief package one of the most successful in history. Do you agree? The studio fell silent. Everyone knew this was more than a question. It was a test. Would Obama openly criticize the sitting president on live TV? He didn't rush. Taking a sip of water, he placed the glass down and looked into the camera. "Well, Mark," he said evenly, "I think the American people deserve facts, not slogans." His words were calm but sharp. Not a rant, not an attack, just deliberate. And with that line, the tone of the night shifted. Meanwhile, at the White House, Trump was watching. Advisors had told him to ignore it, calling it just another TV event. But he couldn't look away. Remote in hand, he expected the usual political theater. Instead, what he saw was different. Obama's measured delivery felt less like politics and more like a cross-examination in court. The audience leaned forward. Many had lost jobs or closed small businesses. For them, this wasn't about ratings. It was about survival. Then, Obama reached into his jacket and unfolded the sheet of paper. The faint crinkle of paper broke the silence as Obama lifted the sheet, holding it casually as if it were just a backup. Looking at Hanley, he said, "These numbers aren't mine. They come directly from the Treasury Department." The host's eyebrows shot up. People in the front rows traded glances, sensing something important. Even the cameras seemed to close in, as though they knew history was about to unfold. The power wasn't just in the numbers, but in Obama's steady confidence. He didn't raise his voice or wave his hands. His calm delivery made it clear this wasn't politics. It was evidence. In the control room, producers scrambled, whispering into earpieces, unsure how far this would go. On Twitter, hashtags exploded. Sexen Obama Live. Town hall shock. Sexed relief truth. Before a single figure was even read aloud. The internet was already burning, and Obama had only set the stage. At the White House, Trump gripped the remote tighter as his advisors exchanged nervous looks. They realized Obama wasn't just addressing the audience in Phoenix, he was speaking to the entire nation. Back on stage, Obama glanced at the paper, then back into the camera with the faintest smile, as if to say, "You can't ignore what's coming." The Phoenix Convention Center buzzed with anticipation. Thousands filled the hall. Students in hoodies, retirees in worn jackets, families juggling restless kids, all waiting for something historic. Hanley leaned back, fully aware he was caught. Between two presidencies, Obama in front of him, Trump watching from afar. The crew whispered frantically through headsets while ratings climbed higher by the minute. Meanwhile, in Washington, the White House communications team drafted emergency talking points. They hadn't expected Obama to show up armed with documents. Obama spread the paper flat on the table like a teacher preparing a lesson. Adjusting his glasses, he looked straight into the camera. The silence was so sharp that even the creak of a chair made people flinch. Then he spoke. According to the Treasury Department, as of last week, only 38% of relief funds reached working families and small businesses. Meanwhile, over 55% went to corporations, many already profitable. Gasps filled the hall. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. A man in the back shook his head. A low murmur spread through the crowd. People weren't just hearing numbers. They were hearing confirmation of doubts they'd carried for months. Hanley, caught between journalist and referee, cleared his throat. So, Mr. President, you're saying the White House's claims don't line up with these official figures? Obama leaned back, folding his hands with a small shrug. I'm not saying anything beyond what's printed here. These aren't my numbers. They're the government's own. The audience grew louder, a rising wave of voices. Viewers at home could feel the contrast. Obama's steady precision against the fiery response everyone knew was coming from Pennsylvania Avenue. Across the country, people froze. In Tulsa, a single mom dropped her half-folded laundry, eyes glued to the screen. In Portland, a retired mechanic let his coffee grow cold, gripping the mug tighter with each word. Obama's tone sharpened. This relief was supposed to keep small businesses alive, to help families struggling with rent. Instead, too much of it padded corporate accounts. That's not opinion, that's fact. Hanley raised his eyebrows. And you're saying this directly contradicts what the president has been telling the public? For the first time, a trace of humor touched Obama's voice. Well, Mark, numbers have a way of speaking for themselves. You can call them inconvenient, but you can't call them fake. The crowd erupted. Short, sharp applause like a verdict delivered. Online, the moment went viral instantly. Clips spread with captions like, Obama drops truth live, and receipts don't lie. Even rival networks rushed to share snippets, unwilling to miss the story. In Washington, Trump's aides scrambled. Brent Keenan, a young press officer, hammered out a rebuttal. We need to hit back now, he stammered. Another aide muttered, he's going to blow when he sees this. And blow up he did. Trump leapt from his chair, sloshing Diet Coke, onto the carpet. He's lying on live TV, he barked, his face red with rage. But in Phoenix, Obama stayed calm. Closing the folder, he folded his hands again. This isn't about politics. It's about people. If the government can't be honest about who it's helping, then folks deserve the truth. Applause roared, longer this time, echoing through the hall. The cameras caught teary eyes, clenched jaws, nodding heads. The audience wasn't just hearing numbers. They were hearing their own lives reflected back at them. Meanwhile, in Washington, tension climbed. Trump wasn't about to stay silent. Hanley edged closer, eyes flicking between the paper on the table and Obama's steady gaze. The studio lights pressed down, amplifying every crease of worry on the audience's faces. He cleared his throat again. Mr. President, let me put this very directly. The White House has gone on record saying more than 70% of relief funds went to families and workers. But what you've shown us doesn't match that. So, are you saying? The question hung in the air. Had the administration misled the American people? The audience leaned forward, breaths shallow. Obama didn't answer right away. His hands rested in his lap, eyes steady, letting silence do the work. Sometimes silence speaks louder than shouting, and in that pause, the nation leaned even closer to their screens. At last, he spoke. Mark, I'm not here to play pundit or throw accusations. But let's be clear, when the numbers released by the government don't match what's being said at the podium, that's not a mistake, that's a choice. The words hit hard. Murmurs spread through the crowd, some gasping out loud. Hanley looked from the audience back to Obama, sensing this was more than a sound bite. It was a turning point. You've got families in Yuma, Arizona, or Wichita, Kansas stretching checks that barely cover groceries, Obama continued, his tone steady but sharp. Barbershops in Detroit shut down because their aid applications were stalled. Meanwhile, corporations already sitting on cash reserves cashed in. If the administration calls that success, fine, but the people living it know better. The camera cut to faces in the audience. A young mother with tears in her eyes, an older man shaking his head. These weren't statistics. They were lives. Rent, prescriptions, survival. Hanley leaned in. So, in your view, this isn't about partisanship. It's about honesty? Obama gave a single nod. Exactly, and honesty shouldn't depend on who holds office. The line landed like thunder. Applause broke out, slower this time, heavier, more deliberate, as if people needed a moment to absorb it. Back in Washington, Trump's living room was chaos. Aides whispered over each other, "He's calling you a liar." "This is an ambush," Trump snapped. "It's fake news, every word." He lunged for his phone, furiously drafting a tweet. In Phoenix, Obama never lost control. Hanley pressed further. "Mr. President, some will say you're accusing the sitting president of deception on live national television. Are you ready for the backlash?" Obama leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, voice softer now. Conversational, almost intimate. Backlash doesn't feed families. Backlash doesn't pay rent. If telling the truth brings criticism, so be it. I'd rather people be angry at me for being honest than comforted by a lie. The audience erupted again, longer, louder. This wasn't partisan applause, it was recognition. Across America, viewers reacted the same way. In Flagstaff, a grandmother whispered, "He's saying what?" "We've all been thinking." At a rest stop in Amarillo, a truck driver slapped the steering wheel. "Finally, someone's telling it straight." Obama lifted the paper once more, tapping it lightly. "These aren't my words. These aren't my numbers. They're your government's. And if your government isn't being straight with you, you deserve to ask why." Hanley swallowed hard, his voice unsteady as he asked the next question. "Do you believe this moment tonight will change the conversation?" Obama gave the faintest smile. "Conversations don't change because of me, Mark. They change because the American people demand better." The words echoed as the crowd roared again, applause shaking the room. Even through TV screens, the energy was electric. This wasn't just another cable news moment. It was something bigger, a contrast so sharp it rippled instantly across the country. But while the audience rose to its feet, Trump rose too. He wasn't going to let Obama command the stage unchallenged. As the cheers faded, Obama leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. He tapped the sheet of paper again, eyes locked on the camera. "I want to read a line word for word," he said, "directly from the Treasury Department's report." The room went still. A chair creaked. Someone shifted nervously. Obama adjusted his glasses and began. Section 4, line 17. Relief funds distributed to corporations with annual revenues over $5 billion. 55%. He paused, letting it sink in. Section 6, line 9. Relief funds deposited directly into small business. Accounts, 12%. The gasp was instant. 12%? Someone blurted out, picked up by the mic. Another voice, angrier, barked, "That's a joke!" The cameras swept across stunned faces, mouths covered, eyes wide. Obama set the paper down softly. He didn't need to add anything. The numbers told the story. This was meant to help families, people out of work, people trying to keep their lights on. Instead, what we're looking at is a bailout for the wealthy. The weight of his words seemed to unite the audience, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as citizens realizing they had been misled. Hanley, visibly shaken, pushed on. "So, Mr. President, you're saying the administration knowingly pushed a false narrative?" Obama didn't flinch. "I'm saying the facts are right here. If the administration told a different story, then the real question is whether the ICE American people are okay being told one thing while the truth says another." The hall erupted again. Cheers, clapping, fists in the air. A man in a worn Phoenix Suns hat leaned toward his wife and said, "He's got the receipts right there." Meanwhile, in Washington, Trump snapped. He stormed across the carpet shouting at aides, "He's lying! Those numbers are fake! Somebody stop him!" His staff tried to calm him, But he grabbed his phone and unleashed a tweet. Obama spreading fake numbers on live TV. Total disgrace. America knows the truth. The tweet lit up screens instantly, but instead of slowing Obama's moment, it fueled it. Fact checkers posted the Treasury report itself. Commentators flooded timelines, and hashtags exploded. But receipts don't lie. Quarter Obama vs Trump. Bull and Truth Live. Back in Phoenix, Hanley pressed harder, his tone sharper now. Mr. President, if the facts are this clear, why hasn't anyone else called it out? Obama leaned back, calm as ever. Because calling out the truth takes preparation. It takes patience, Obama said evenly, and sometimes the willingness to stand in the fire. A lot of people are afraid of what happens when you challenge power. But I'm not in office anymore. I've got nothing to lose by saying what. The data already shows. The words landed hard, bold, and unflinching. The audience erupted again, louder than ever, like a collective exhale. On screens across America, a split image told the story. Obama in Phoenix, steady and composed, laying out facts. Trump in Washington, red-faced, shouting into his phone as aides scrambled. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. In a diner in Albuquerque, forks hovered midair as customers stared at the TV. A waitress muttered, "He just called him out without even saying his name." At a gas station outside Reno, drivers crowded around a phone, replaying the clip again and again, shaking their heads. Obama closed with a line that cut straight through the noise. America doesn't need more spin. America needs honesty. And if honesty makes people uncomfortable, it's because the truth usually does. The hall exploded. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering while cameras captured every second. Upstairs, the control room was frantic. Producers barking orders, camera operators told to stay locked on Obama's face, a social media coordinator already clipping footage for instant release. This wasn't just a studio reaction. It was everywhere. In a Phoenix bar, conversations stopped as the TVs blared Obama's words. One man slapped the counter. Finally, somebody's saying it. In Dallas, nurses on break huddled around a phone, replaying the clip to make sure they'd heard right. In Fresno, a farmer leaned against his truck listening on the radio. "I knew it," he muttered. "I damn well knew it." Online, the fire spread instantly. Twitter feeds flooded with hashtags. Jack Obama Live, Jack Truth on Air, Receipts Don't Lie. Within minutes, clips of Obama reading the figures hit millions of views. On TikTok, users stitched the footage with stunned reactions. Wide eyes, jaws dropping, captions scrolling in disbelief. In the back rows of the Phoenix Convention Center, journalists pounded keyboards, knowing they were watching the story that would dominate headlines for days. Headlines hit the wire within minutes. Obama drops Treasury. Numbers live. Former president contradicts Trump's relief claims. Town Hall, bombshell rocks, Washington. Inside the White House, unease turned to panic. Trump's aides circled him like firefighters around a blaze. Brent Keenan, phone in hand, stammered, "Mr. President, it's everywhere. You're the top. Hashtag, and not in a good way." Trump's face reddened. "This is lies, pure lies. Why isn't anyone fact-checking him? Where's Fox? Get me on the phone right now." He stormed across the room, barking orders. An aide whispered, "Sir, Patriot News is live. We can arrange a call-in." Trump snapped, "Do it. I'm not waiting." The aide sprinted off while Trump fired off another tweet. "Obama should be ashamed. Total liar. America knows better." In Phoenix, Obama stayed seated, hands folded. Hanley steered the conversation toward solutions. So, what should be done differently? Obama's reply was simple. Be honest about where the money went, then fix it. If you can't admit the problem, you can't fix it. Audience members nodded, murmuring in agreement. The frustration wasn't partisan anymore. It was collective. Then whispers cut through the control room. A producer leaned into Hanley's earpiece. "Trump's about to go live. He's calling in." Hanley's eyes flickered, but he kept his composure. "Do you believe the president will respond tonight?" he asked. Obama gave a faint smile. He usually does. The timing was uncanny. 2 minutes later, TV screen split. On the left, Obama calm and composed in Phoenix. On the right, the Kyron blared breaking news. President Trump calls in live. Trump's voice thundered, "Fake! All fake. The numbers he's waving aren't real. It's disgraceful. Obama's trying to tear down America with lies. I've given more to the American people than any president in history." The contrast was brutal. Obama sitting still, hands folded, while Trump's voice raced, words tumbling over each other. In living rooms across the country, viewers exchanged looks. A student in Sacramento laughed. "He sounds like he's losing it." A grandmother in Tampa muttered, "If the numbers are wrong, shouldn't he just show us the real ones?" In Phoenix, Obama didn't flinch. Hanley raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to respond to the president's comments?" Obama leaned slightly towards the mic. "I don't need to respond. The report already did." The crowd erupted, drowning out Trump's voice. Producers scrambled with audio levels, but the optics were undeniable. One man calm, factual, steady. The other, defensive and furious. Social media lit up again. Memes spread within minutes. Side-by-side screenshots of Obama's quiet expression and Trump's all-caps tweets. A Facebook post read, "This is the difference between a leader and a man obsessed with saving face." In the White House, Trump slammed his phone on the table. "They're cheering him. Why are they cheering him?" His aides stayed silent. There was no answer that would calm him. And the real blow wasn't just the cheers in Phoenix. It was how quickly America beyond those walls began choosing sides. Trump's voice kept bellowing down the phone line. "Disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. Obama's lying to the American people. He's a failed president, trying to make me look bad because he can't stand my success. Nobody's been more successful than me. Nobody." Trump's voice boomed through televisions nationwide, sharp and unrelenting, like a storm rolling. In Phoenix, the audience shifted uneasily, eyes flicking to the split screen. On one side, Obama sat composed, hands folded neatly. On the other, Trump's voice came fast and frantic, barreling forward like a train without brakes. Hanley tried to steer control. "Mr. President, we have the former president here with the Treasury Zone report. Are you saying the report itself is false?" "Absolutely false," Trump snapped. "Garbage. Bureaucrats make mistakes all the time. They cook numbers. They leak fake data to hurt me. Everyone knows it." Gasps rippled through the studio. Obama stayed still, eyes fixed on Hanley, declining to engage. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. One man rattled and defensive, the other calm, almost patient. At the White House, Trump paced furiously, phone clutched tight, aides trailing nervously behind. "No, no! I've got to set the record straight. They're watching me. The people need to hear me fight." His rant grew wilder on air. "I built the greatest economy in history. Then China sent us the virus, and now Obama comes on TV spreading lies. It's disgusting. Jealousy, pure jealousy." The Phoenix crowd's tension shifted to disbelief. A young man muttered, "He sounds like my uncle after too much coffee," drawing chuckles. Hanley glanced at Obama, eyebrow raised as if to ask, if he'd like to respond. Obama gave the slightest shake of his head. Silence became his answer. Across the country, viewers saw it too. At a Tucson bar, people laughed. "He's unraveling live," one man said. In Boise, a mother turned to her teenage son. "See the difference?" One man talks facts, the other just yells. Networks smelled blood. Producers held the split screen, milking the visual. Obama steady and silent, Trump raging through a phone line. Analysts scribbled notes for the morning shows. One commentator whispered into his mic, "We may be watching the moment public perception shifts." But Trump doubled down. "Nobody's been treated worse than me. Nobody. The media, the Democrats, even some Republicans, they're all against me. But I fight. I fight harder for the American people than anyone ever has." His voice cracked as he repeated it. Harder than anyone ever has. For the first time, Obama leaned toward the mic, waiting for a pause. When Hanley nodded, he spoke, evenly. "I think the American people can decide for themselves who's telling the truth. I'll just remind everyone, these numbers aren't mine. They're the government's. If the president wants to call his own Treasury Department fake, that's his choice." The hall erupted. Applause thundered through the rafters, drowning out Trump's voice. Some stood, clapping furiously. Others cheered so loudly the feed seemed to shake. The split screen became almost comical. Obama with a faint smile. Trump's voice shrill and distant, growing smaller by the second. In the White House, Trump slammed the phone onto his desk. "They're clapping for him on live TV. They're supposed to be clapping for me!" Trump lashed out, kicking a chair so hard it screeched across the floor. His aides exchanged uneasy looks. One ventured, "Sir, maybe we should hold off tonight. Regroup." "No regrouping." Trump roared, eyes blazing. "We hit back harder. I want every network, every friendly outlet saying Obama lied. Make the calls. Now." But while his team scrambled, the damage was already done. The public had seen the split screen. Calm versus chaos. Facts versus fury. And no spin could erase it. At the Phoenix Convention Center, Obama leaned back, lifted his glass of water, and said simply, "At the end of the day, leadership isn't about how loud you shout, it's about whether people can trust what you say." The crowd rose to its feet, cheers rolling like thunder. Yet beyond the studio walls, the real impact was unfolding. In diners, living rooms, and break rooms across the country, the conversations people were already having would prove even more powerful than the broadcast itself. The split screen remained frozen on millions of TVs. Obama calm, composed, hands folded as if leading a class. Trump's voice frantic, words spilling too quickly to follow. No pundit needed to explain it. The difference was unmistakable. In a coffee shop in Albuquerque, college students stared at the wall-mounted TV. One laughed nervously. One guy's cool as ice. The others, screaming like someone stole his car. Another shook his head. "This isn't politics anymore. It's about who you trust when everything's on the line." In a small-town barbershop outside Omaha, clippers went silent mid-cut as customers turned to the screen. The barber muttered, "That's the difference between confidence and panic. You can't fake calm." Back in Phoenix, producers whispered updates into Hanley's earpiece. Ratings were skyrocketing. Trying to stay composed, he asked one final question. "Mr. President, some viewers say this is less about numbers and more about leadership. How would you describe what's happening tonight?" Obama paused, glanced at the audience, then answered, softly, "Leadership isn't about proving you're right. It's about showing people the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. If your first reaction is anger, maybe you weren't being honest to begin with." The applause that followed was heavier this time, not just cheers for a man, but recognition of the moment's clarity. Trump, still on the line, tried to cut back in. "Wrong. Completely wrong. I've done more for this country than anyone. Obama's jealous. The fake news is jealous. Everybody's jealous." His voice cracked under the strain. Hanley glanced at the camera and signaled. Producers cut the call. Within seconds, Trump's voice vanished from the broadcast, leaving only Obama under the studio lights. The silence that followed was striking. In Portland, a family huddled on the couch. The father whispered, "One man gave facts, the other gave excuses. Which one do you think history will remember?" In Tulsa, a retired teacher scribbled notes in her journal. Later, she'd tell her neighbors, It felt like watching a civics lesson live on TV. Online, the reaction only intensified. Memes spread instantly. Obama captioned, "Cooler than cool," beside Trump's image labeled, "Shouting won't change the facts." Side-by-side screenshots flooded Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. By midnight. By the end of the night, the split screen itself had become the story. In Washington, the White House strategy team worked late drafting counter-arguments, though even they admitted privately the optics were crushing. One aide muttered, "We look like chaos next to him." Obama, meanwhile, ended the broadcast without theatrics. He thanked Hanley, shook his hand, and gave the audience a small nod. No gloating, no victory lap, just a quiet exit, leaving the weight of the numbers behind him. In Phoenix, the reaction was electric. People lingered in their seats, buzzing in low but animated tones. A mother whispered to her daughter, "That's how you hold someone accountable." The girl nodded, wide-eyed, as if she'd just witnessed something unforgettable. Across America, the ripple spread. In Nevada, diners, Wyoming truck stops, and Seattle high-rises, the debate was already underway. It wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about trust. By morning, the footage was everywhere. Phoenix newsstands sold out of papers, front pages, plastered with the now iconic split screen. Obama calm and measured on the left, Trump flushed and furious on the right. One headline read simply, "Two presidents, two realities." Cable networks looped the exchange endlessly. Some hosts dissected Obama's steady tone, calling it surgical. Others fixated on Trump's outburst, asking if he had lost control of the narrative. But the real debate wasn't in TV studios. It was in everyday places. In a Reno diner, voices rose over coffee refills. "Obama brought facts," one man insisted, jabbing at the newspaper. "He read straight from the report. You can't fake that." Across the counter, a woman shot back, "Trump said those numbers were wrong. You think I'll believe some paper over the president?" In a Flagstaff hardware store, two clerks replayed the clip on a dusty TV near the register. "Did you see Trump's face?" one asked. "Looked like a kettle ready to blow." The other chuckled. Meanwhile, Obama looked like he was teaching Sunday school, like he didn't even need to try. Even classrooms picked it up. In a Salt Lake City civics class, a teacher showed a short clip and asked, "What do you notice about how each man handled the pressure?" A boy in the back raised his hand. One was calm, the other was mad. The teacher nodded. "And which one made you want to listen?" The boy didn't hesitate. The calm one. In Washington, pollsters scrambled overnight. Numbers told the story. In Ohio, 62% said they trusted Obama's figures over Trump's claims. In Pennsylvania, 58% admitted the moment changed how they viewed the administration's honesty. In political terms, these weren't ripples, they were earthquakes. The next morning, Trump's inner circle gathered in the West Wing. Brent Keenan slid fresh poll numbers across the Resolute desk. "Sir, it's not good. Independents are siding with Obama. Even parts of our base say they don't know who to believe." Trump's face flushed. "They'll believe me. They always do. These polls are fake." He shoved the papers aside, but his advisors knew the damage was already set. Obama, by contrast, stayed silent. No tweets, no follow-up interviews. He quietly boarded a flight back to Washington. At the airport, reporters shouted questions, but he only waved politely and kept walking. His silence, in the end, made the contrast sharper than any words could. While Trump raged, Obama's restraint only magnified the weight of his words. In El Paso, a pastor wove the moment into his Sunday sermon. "Truth doesn't need to shout," he told his congregation. "When lies roar, truth whispers, and still it is heard." The church murmured its agreement, some nodding, some wiping tears. In Phoenix, where it had all begun, people were still talking. A taxi driver told his passenger, "I was there in the audience. You could feel it, man, like he wasn't just talking politics. He was talking about us." the passenger replied quietly. That's why it hit so hard. He made it real. Online, the frenzy hadn't slowed. Memes multiplied. Late-night comedians mocked Trump's meltdown. But buried in the noise were raw stories from ordinary people. Small business owners shared their struggles, confirming what Obama had said. A bakery owner in Santa Fe wrote, "We applied for aid 3 times and never saw $1." Meanwhile, the hotel chain down the street got millions. Obama was right. Her post went viral. The story had grown beyond a fiery town hall. It was now a national conversation about honesty, accountability, and who the government was really working for. People weren't just watching, they were participating. The true impact, though, wouldn't be measured in applause or memes. It would be measured in how Americans processed what they saw, and in the uncomfortable questions they began asking about leadership itself. The following week felt less like politics and more like reckoning. News outlets ran think pieces. Podcasts dissected the exchange. Talk radio hosts tried to spin it in their own way. But beneath all the noise, ordinary people kept coming back to a single question. Who can we trust when the stakes are this high? At a factory in Toledo, workers gathered around a break room TV. One man, grease still on his hands, shook his head as the clip replayed. You know what gets me? He didn't yell. He didn't wave his arms. He just read the numbers. And it hit harder than all that shouting. Another worker replied, "That's because it wasn't about him. It was about us." In Phoenix, the local paper ran an editorial titled, "Facts Don't Yell." It noted how Obama's composure let the numbers speak for themselves, while Trump's reaction only magnified the contrast. Americans aren't just tired of being lied to. The piece read, they're tired of being shouted at. Inside Washington, strategists scrambled. Some Republicans quietly admitted the optics were devastating. It's not that people love Obama, one confided off the record. It's that he made Trump look out of control, and voters hate chaos. Democrats, meanwhile, stayed cautious, careful not to gloat. They knew the moment belonged to Obama, not the party. Polls told the rest of the story. In Florida, nearly 60% of independents said they trusted Obama's numbers over Trump's claims. In Michigan, trust in the administration's economic message dropped by double digits. Even pro-Trump outlets struggled to dismiss the shift. But beyond data points and headlines, something deeper was stirring. Americans were reflecting on what leadership really meant. At a community center in Boise, a retired Army sergeant told a group of young veterans, "When you're in command, you don't scream at your men to follow you," the retired sergeant told the young veterans. "You show them the way." That's the difference we saw on TV. One man showed, the other shouted. Conversations like that echoed across the country. Parents used the moment to teach their kids about honesty. Teachers turned it into a real-world civics lesson. Even late-night comedians, though quick with jokes, circled back to the same theme. Shouting isn't strength. For many, the bigger picture was less about politics and more about character. Obama had shown that truth can be powerful without theatrics. Trump had shown that defensiveness can reveal more than words. Together, they had created an unintentional masterclass in contrast. In Denver, a small business owner spoke outside her shuttered cafe. "I lost everything, waiting for that relief money that never came. And when I saw Obama hold up those numbers, I felt like someone finally saw us, not as statistics, but as people." Her words made the evening news, amplifying the sense that this was bigger than two men. It was a mirror held up to the nation. Inside the White House, Trump's aides begged him to pivot, to change the subject, but he refused. Night after night, he returned to the town hall, at rallies, in interviews, calling Obama a liar, a fraud, even demanding investigations. Each time, though, it backfired. The more he ranted, the calmer Obama's delivery seemed in comparison. Obama, for his part, stayed silent. No interviews, no statements. His restraint spoke louder than any rebuttal, leaving Americans to reflect, replay the clip, and decide for themselves. By week's end, analysts were calling it a turning point. A PBS commentator put it simply: sometimes the truth doesn't need amplification, it just needs contrast. And in this case, the contrast couldn't have been starker. In living rooms and break rooms across the nation, people talked less about politics and more about values. Calm over chaos, facts over fury, patience over panic. But one question lingered. What would this moment mean for the future? Not just for two men, but for the country they claimed to represent. By the close of that turbulent week, America wasn't just replaying clips. It was rethinking what leadership meant. The split-screen contrast, Obama calm, Trump raging, had been broadcast into millions of homes, and the country couldn't stop talking about it. The words hadn't been complicated. The delivery wasn't flashy. But that's what made it powerful. In a grocery store parking lot in Mesa, Arizona, two men loaded bags into their cars while rehashing the broadcast. "I'm no Obama fan," one admitted, slamming his trunk. "But you can't argue with the paper he held up. That wasn't spin." "Yeah," the other man replied, shrugging. "And yelling into a phone doesn't make the bills any easier to pay." That exchange wasn't unique. From small towns to big cities, people were saying the same thing. One man looked like he was thinking about the people, the other about himself. Commentators tried to reduce it to sound bites, but the truth was bigger than headlines. It wasn't just about one night in Phoenix. It was about trust, about how Americans measure honesty when the stakes aren't politics, but survival. A bakery owner in Santa Fe summed it up on a local radio call-in. "For the first time, it felt like someone was speaking for us. In the end, people didn't want someone screaming at them. They wanted someone willing to tell the truth, even if it stung. That's leadership." Trump kept shouting, at rallies, on call-ins, in long, angry monologues. He dismissed Obama's numbers, dismissed the polls, dismissed the growing doubts of everyday Americans. But the louder he yelled, the less people listened. The conversation had shifted. It wasn't about partisanship anymore. It was about tone, about trust, about the difference between noise and clarity. Obama, by contrast, stayed silent. He slipped back into private life with no interviews, no follow-ups. His silence wasn't weakness, it was deliberate. By stepping back, he let the moment grow bigger than himself. His calm at the town hall and his refusal to pile on afterward gave the impression of someone confident enough to let the facts speak for themselves. Across America, those lessons sank in. A single mother in Fresno told her kids at dinner, "Pay attention to who stays calm when things get tough. That's the person you can count on." In Minneapolis, a retired firefighter told his grandson, "When you're telling the truth, you don't have to scream. People can feel it." The town hall became more than a political showdown. It became a teaching moment. It reminded people that leadership isn't about volume, but clarity. Not about blaming, but owning reality. And it proved that facts don't bend just because someone yells louder. One headline later called it, "The night calm beat chaos." But for many watching, it was simpler. They realized the loudest person in the room isn't always the most honest. Sometimes it's the one who barely raises his voice. That was the real lesson buried in all the shouting and statistics. In times of crisis, people don't want theatrics. They want truth. They want someone who respects them enough to lay it out plainly, even when it hurts. So as the dust settled, one question remained. For every viewer, every voter, every citizen, when push comes to shove, who do you trust to tell you the truth? The answer to that question will shape more than elections. It will shape the future of the country. That's what Phoenix left us with. A night when a sheet of paper spoke louder than 1,000 tweets, when patience beat panic, and when Americans were reminded that real strength doesn't need to shout. And if you've stayed with me through this story, take a moment to think about what it means for you. How do you measure honesty in the people you trust? How do you separate noise from truth? Those are questions worth asking, not just in politics, but in everyday life. If this story made you think, if it made you feel the weight of that contrast, then hit subscribe. Because the conversations here aren't just about politics. They're about trust, about life, about the kind of world we want to leave behind. And there are more stories like this, real, raw, and revealing, coming your way. Because truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs people willing to hear it.